Well, howdy there, Internet people. I'm James from Psychedelic Spotlight, and today we have a really fun episode for you. That's because I'm going to be talking to a gentleman by the name of Mr. Joshua White. He is the founder and executive director of this really cool nonprofit called Fireside. So, without further ado, let's introduce the man of the hour. Joshua, thank you for being on the podcast today, or the show today, whatever we're calling it. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Just excited to be here.
Fantastic. Well, part of the reason we're talking today is this hot new documentary has just dropped on the presses on Netflix called How to Change Your Mind. And actually, I got the book here that it's based on.
hmm
And I just wanted to kind of pick your brain as a psychedelics expert, as somebody that is been involved in the community on what the impact of this will be, and then also about your organization. So I guess first off the bat, why don't you talk about Fireside for a little bit?
Sure. So Fireside is a nationwide nonprofit, and we run the Psychedelic Peer Support Line, which is a free telephone helpline for people who are having psychedelic experiences, people who are trip sitting for others, and also for people integrating past psychedelic experiences. So if you're tripping now, you can call us, you can text us. Or if you're wanting to process a psychedelic experience that happened last night or 25 years ago, you can call us or text us. And we're staffed by an amazing group of volunteers who dedicate their time to providing human to human support. Peer support means really using your own lived experience as a way of supporting others who are having a similar experience. And so we really just see this as a network of connection and understanding for people as they navigate these powerful and sacred experiences.
So let me get this straight, and maybe I'll do it through a couple of different examples. Let's say that I'm a person that is currently under the influence of a certain psychedelic, let's call it LSD for argument's sake, and I'm not having a great experience.
Mhm.
I can call 62 Fireside, as you see on the screen now. And then what happens? What is the process here? I dial this number. I'm currently having a bad experience on my own, let's say. What happens?
Sure. Well, I should also mention that we do have a mobile app, and
Okay.
we encourage people to download the app in this moment so that it's there when you need it. Dialing a phone number or even scrolling through your contact information when you're tripping can be really challenging. What happens when you reach out to us
Just
is
real quickly, the app is called Fireside. That's it?
Fireside Project.
Fireside Project. Awesome.
Yep, and available on iPhone and Android.
Alrighty.
Yeah, and what happens when you reach out to us is, the first thing is you'll speak to what we call our connector, who will hear about, kind of where you are. Maybe you're 2 hours into an LSD trip, and their job is to really make that initial connection, and then connect you to a volunteer who will have a longer conversation with you. We have no time limit on conversations with people tripping, and really, what we're doing is meeting you where you are. Um, that we have no agenda. We're not guides. We're not therapists. We're just people who are there to listen, to validate your experience, to if necessary, like share some of our own experiences to help build connection. And it's really wherever you want to go with the conversation. Maybe you're feeling just scared and overwhelmed, and we'll reflect back. Yeah, it sounds like you're going through a really hard time right now. That's really normal for LSD. It's really normal for other substances, and I'm here with you as long as you'd like me to be.
And what's been your experience or the experience of the volunteers for people that have called in that were in the middle of a difficult time, a difficult experience due to ingestion of psychedelics? Have most people been able to work through the several hours that it takes? Or, yeah, just what has the general experience been like?
Yeah, every call is unique. Every call is a miracle. Some of them are 1 minute long, and some of them are 3 hours long. A lot of our callers just want to know we're there for them, and simply by having a conversation that says, "I'm tripping. Are you going to be there waiting for me if I need you again?" And you could just say yes, and that can make all the difference in the world. Um, Often our conversations with people who are tripping, they go through kind of this initial connection building stage. Someone's really scared, they're feeling really alone, and we really can kind of build connection through validation and normalization. So a lot of people are feeling terrified and they feel like there's just something wrong with them. There's something wrong with the experience they're having. And to be able to say, like, you're having a really intense experience right now, and this is part of what can happen on this substance, and it's totally normal, and I'm here with you. So that can really build powerful connection. And I think peer support is magic because we've been there. We've had our own psychedelic experiences, and so when a volunteer says, like, yeah, I know it's a lot right now, that's coming from a place of having been there before, so that carries a lot of weight. And then often what happens next is, after that kind of period of distress and anxiety passes sometimes, there's just often this time when the caller is really turning towards their psychedelic experience and seeing it for what it is, which is an opportunity to really learn about ourselves and to understand and hopefully fall in love with the different parts of ourselves. So there's that exploration that often happens. And then at the end, there is often just this period of overwhelming gratitude that goes both ways, honestly. The gratitude from the caller for the miracle that you can reach out on a phone and talk to someone who loves supporting you. And then on the volunteer side, the miracle of being in this deeply vulnerable place with someone, being present for them, and allowing their own inner healer to kind of guide them.
So I know that you are the founder and executive of Fireside, so maybe this isn't something you've necessarily done, but have you ever been on the other end of that phone call listening to somebody calling in?
Yeah, I've volunteered. I spent my first 10 months at Fireside volunteering, and it was I, it's just hard to put into words how meaningful the calls were. Um, One of the things, I was having a conversation with one of our supervisors last night, and we were marveling how often the callers that find their way to us are experiencing things that are so similar to what we ourselves have experienced. And it's almost unnerving, right? Like, I remember having a conversation with someone who was going through some really challenging separations from their biological family. And that's something that I've gone through myself. And being able to connect with someone who has had such a similar life experience feels uh, serendipitous.
So, what is the strategy then for somebody that is in the midst of, let's call it a bad trip, for lack of a better term? How do you help somebody that's really in a bad place?
Sure. Well, the first thing is, I know that bad trip is a common term. We prefer to use the term like difficult or challenging trip, and that's because bad feels like it's a statement about what is true. This is a bad experience, but actually, often what we think of as a bad experience is really just a challenging experience, and sometimes those challenging experiences really are the richest opportunity for us to learn about ourselves. There's the great quote, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek," the Brene Brown quote. And so I think even just by reframing and saying, this is a really challenging experience right now. It's normal to be having a challenging experience. And and sometimes just hearing that can make all the difference. And and then over time, I think people start to be able to wonder, like, what is it about this experience right now that is so hard? Maybe my fear is coming from a fear of losing control, and then that's interesting. And going towards, like, is that how you approach other situations in your life? So I would say that we really, part of being a peer supporter, part of being a space holder, is to not really like have a strategy, so to speak, but really to be tuned into what is the emotional experience of the person who's on the other end of the line, and how do we reflect that back to them. Now, I will say that sometimes when people call us, they may be in a location that is not suitable for any number of reasons. So someone may call us from a loud party where they feel really overwhelmed, and we may, initially kind of focus on their setting, right? I wonder what it would feel like to maybe go to a different room of the house where maybe you have a little bit more privacy. And so focusing on the setting initially can be really helpful, because obviously, like, if your setting is not comfortable and relaxing, then it's hard to kind of go inwards.
Yeah, it's kind of really the foundation, set and setting. One of the very first things that you learn to ensure that your trip is good. So why don't we talk about that then? I know that obviously nobody here is promoting anybody trying illegal psychedelics, but if somebody has already made up their mind to do that, what are some harm reduction techniques that they can take?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that the first thing is, well, I guess the very first thing I would say is having an understanding that psychedelics are incredibly powerful tools. And like any powerful tool, it can really have beneficial effects, um, and it can also create considerable risks. Just that insight alone is incredibly powerful. I think there is, frankly, misrepresentation or distortion of psychedelics throughout the media, where there is an exclusive focus on psychedelics being healing and curative, and no mention of the risks. And that's just outright dangerous. So having that awareness is the first step. I think doing research is another really important step. What substance are you thinking of taking? How long does it last? What's the proper dose? And are there um, any kind of contraindications, for instance, for me? If you have, if you're bipolar schizophrenic and you're on different medications, it's better to look and see what other experiences have people had with those disorders and this medication. So Arrowhead is one great place to go, or even, consulting with a doctor to see, like, I'm thinking of taking this. Is there anything I should be aware of? So those are some initial first steps.
So just to summarize that, respect the substance that you're taking, do your research, and then I guess also know your family history and your own personal history of mental illness to ensure that you're not going to make it worse.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then, once you've kind of taken those basic, safety precautions, there's well, I guess there are a few more things, right? One is test your substance. Fentanyl is the number one leading cause of death for people 18 to 45 in the US by a long shot.
It's so scary.
It's
So
terrifying.
scary.
And it's different from how, things were 20 years ago. Um, Fentanyl is everywhere. Other substances that are potentially dangerous are everywhere. And so you should not be putting a psychedelic into your body unless you have tested it yourself, or unless someone you trust has tested it. And then I really think that there's this kind of internal process that is around set and setting, right? And kind of asking yourself, like you would on the verge of any potentially powerful spiritual experience, like, why am I doing this right now? What do I hope to get out of this experience? What am I afraid of? What do I think might come up for me? So, and I think the longer that you can cultivate that intention and that mindset, the more powerful potentially, the experience can be. And then also, we talk about this process of integration, which is the processing and integrating of the material that came up for you afterwards. And that's a process that can take, weeks, months, or longer. I'm still integrating some of my first psychedelic experiences. And so having the awareness going in that the experience doesn't end when the substance leaves your body is incredibly important.
So I want to pull on a thread that we were talking about a minute ago, which is when you were discussing basically respecting these medicines and understanding that not every experience is a good experience. To bring it back to how we opened up this conversation about the documentary How to Change Your Mind, which is now on Netflix. I
Mhm.
know you haven't seen it yet, and maybe if people don't want any spoilers, plug your ears for 15 seconds. But in this documentary, throughout the 4 hours, it showcases maybe 12 people, 10 people that all had perhaps the best case scenario happen to them. They went in basically suicidal and they came out a completely changed person. And here's the trailer for it for everybody to see. So I just want maybe to pick your brain on it. I know you haven't seen it, but you've read the book, on whether it's responsible only to be focusing on the good side and not necessarily the potential harms.
I think it's really important when talking about psychedelics, especially knowing that many people are going to be learning about psychedelics for the first time, to present a more comprehensive picture of what really happens when you take these substances and what can happen, right? So it is an incredibly exciting time to be alive and to see the types of results that we're seeing from the MAPS MDMA for PTSD clinical trial and other clinical trials. But it's important to keep in mind that in order to be enrolled in one of those clinical trials, the screening procedures are incredibly rigorous. The preparation is incredibly rigorous. The support during the experience is extensive. And the support after the experience. And so I think the concern that I have is that simply hearing from someone that they were suicidal or they were an alcoholic, and then they took psilocybin or they took MDMA and now they're great. That is undoubtedly true for some people. It's also not the complete picture. That person went through an extensive preparation process, extensive support during, and extensive support after. And so I think the risk is that people hear about those results and think, well, then I guess I can just take 5 grams of mushrooms alone in my apartment and the same thing is going to happen to me. Now, it might happen for people. And, I've certainly had my share of incredibly powerful psychedelic experiences. But when we're talking about millions and millions of people taking psychedelics, if even 1% of those people end up seeking emergency services, that's a major problem. And even though we don't have great data yet about how psychedelics can create reliance on emergency services, we know from the Global Drug Survey, most recent survey results, that 1% of people who take psychedelics wind up in the emergency room, and that number quadruples for people who take psychedelics with underlying psychiatric conditions like depression and anxiety. And so those may be some of the same people who consume popular media about psychedelics and think that the answer is just to take the substance. And psychedelics work differently than other medicines in Western medicine, right? If I have a headache, I take a Tylenol or an Advil, and then I'm sort of a passive recipient. My headache goes away. I don't have to do anything. Psychedelics work differently. They can bring up and unearth things from the depths of your subconscious that you have to really work to integrate and receive support to integrate. And without knowing that, there are very serious risks to people's mental health and physical safety.
So that kind of gets back to our previous conversation about respecting the drug, doing your research, and I don't know what that sound was, but that's okay.
Right.
And just following the right process, essentially. I do want to pivot here for a second because I want to give you the chance to brag a little bit about the success of Fireside. So the organization's what, a year and a half old now, something around those lines.
Yeah, the psychedelic peer support line launched April 14th, 2021.
So, what have been the results, the successes of Fireside, the support line, everything else that your organization does?
Oh, thank you. Well, I think, we're really, a community within Fireside, and our success is the product of our volunteers devoting over 15,000 hours of time to supporting each other, and our incredible supervisors and staff devoting their time to training and supporting our volunteers. So since our launch, we've had 4,000 conversations. About 60% of them have been by phone and 40% by text. We know that from our post-call surveys that we have helped hundreds of people avoid trips to the emergency room or calling 911. We know that we've de-escalated, thousands of people from psychological distress and helped avoid physical and emotional trauma. But also, I think more than just the harm reduction, we really helped people, I think, fulfill the potential of their psychedelic experiences. Another thing I'm really proud of is Fireside Project's Equity Initiative, which gives people from marginalized communities and military veterans the opportunity to process past psychedelic experiences with someone sharing their identity. So starting only a week ago now, if you are BIPOC, if you're transgender, or if you're military veteran, you can call Fireside Project and you can process a past psychedelic experience with someone sharing your identity. So if you're a vet and you want to speak to someone who is a vet, who's had similar experiences, you can call in and speak to a vet. So that's just launched, and we think that will be really a foundational tool for creating a more inclusive psychedelic community where people of all identities are welcomed.
That's amazing. Just touching on what you were talking about earlier about how to integrate your experience, just as we round this out, can you maybe talk about, first of all, what does that even mean? And second of all, how Fireside is helping people integrate their experiences? Because as you said earlier, you don't have to be in the middle of a experience to call you. You can call afterwards to help figure out what the heck transpired in your experience.
Sure. Well, one of the things that we've noticed is that people who have not prepared are going to have incredibly hard times integrating. And that's because if you consume some popular media and you think all I have to do is eat some mushrooms and I'll be cured of my depression, you may experience what we call like an ego dissolution, this feeling during your psychedelic experience that you're dying or have died. Your ego has to reconstitute itself in the hours afterwards, and you may not be prepared to be processing some of that material that came up. And so that's just one thing to note. But integration really is the process of exploring what happened during the psychedelic experience. What are the lessons that came up for me about how I want to live, a different and healthier and more joyous life, and then applying those lessons to actually create positive life change. One of the things that we know is a lot of psychedelics create this period of neuroplasticity, where there's literally an opportunity for your brain to more easily form connections in the wake of your psychedelic experience. And so it's really, integration is, well, how do you want to use that time to really deepen those new connections and create positive life changes? And so really what we do at Fireside, in a lot of ways, it's the same thing as what we do during a trip, which is to get out of the way and to create a safe and reflective container where people can process what came up for them. Someone may call in and say, what kept coming up for me was my relationship to my job. I just feel, during my psychedelic experience, all I could think about was that my job was not resonant with who I am as a person. And we would just support someone in that kind of inquiry into, well, what was it that came up for you? And what are the changes you may want to make in your life?
And then I guess just last thing here, as we can see on the screen, I know this is something you wanted to talk about, is the steps you should take when you're thinking about finding a facilitator. Because actually, I'll just let you take it away. What are some of the the issues when looking for a facilitator?
Sure. Well, first I should say that we don't encourage anyone to engage in any illegal conduct, including psychedelics. Some people may make that choice on their own to have a guided, facilitated psychedelic experience. Now, outside of clinical trials, serving as a facilitator is illegal, and so it's unregulated. And for that reason, that's really created a space where there are some unethical and unscrupulous facilitators who sexually assault the people that they are supporting, or who just really don't know what they're doing and don't provide people with the support that they need. And so we've created on our website, along with Center for Optimal Living and Juliana Mulligan, two really important documents. One is warning signs to look for when selecting a facilitator. Has this person been arrested or accused of any crimes? How do they think about their role as a facilitator? Are they a shaman? How did they come to that term? Were they authorized by an indigenous person to actually use that term? And sure, it's possible that if you have this type of conversation with a prospective facilitator, they may just lie to you. But it's better to have a long and thorough conversation with someone who's going to really be supporting you during your most vulnerable moments, during which you are incapable of consenting to anything, even if you think you are. And so we created the warning signs, as well as a list of extremely detailed questions that you can literally read aloud to your facilitator, hear their responses, and then give yourself some space to talk through the responses with someone who you know and trust. At Fireside Project, we do receive calls from people who have been abused and gaslit by their facilitators. And as an organization that focuses on harm reduction, we felt like it was our duty to create these documents to empower people to choose a facilitator who is going to treat them with reverence and follow the best safety practices.
Yeah, it's a scary world out there. And if you're doing something like taking a mind altering substance, you want to make sure the people that are around you are trustworthy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Joshua, thank you so much for having this chat with us today. Where can people learn more about Fireside?
Well, people can go to our website, firesideproject.org. We encourage everyone listening to download our app immediately if possible, so it's there when you need it. Fireside Project on the Apple Store. On our website, you can also sign up for our newsletter, where you can get all the updates about Fireside. We have a huge interest in volunteering on the Psychedelic Peer Support Line. If you're interested in that, signing up for our newsletter is the best way to do that. And we also have a robust social media presence, so you can follow us on Instagram, etc.
Are there any prerequisites to volunteer for you?
There are not. Well, one obvious prerequisite is you have to be over 18 and have access to fast internet and a phone. But beyond that, no. We have a mix of people who are themselves clinicians, but we also have software engineers and college professors. We like to say you check your credentials at the door. And when we're interviewing people and going through this pretty rigorous application process, what we ask ourselves is, if I were tripping, or the person who I loved most in the world was tripping, would I want this person to support me? And that's who's on the Psychedelic Peer Support Line.
Well, fantastic. Thank you, Joshua, for being here. And thank you for all the work you guys are doing.
Thank you for the opportunity. And thanks to you and the great folks at Psychedelic Spotlight for this opportunity.
Perfect. I'm sure we'll chat again soon.